All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
Hello. Yes, they did it over the weekend, didn't they? They did it over the weekend. Yes, they did. They shivved him is what they did. They shivved Grandpa, and now he's out, and now somebody else is in. They've done it before. The last Grandpa they shivved. Do you remember who it was, Kim? Do you remember who the Democrats shivved the last time?
No.
Bernie Sanders is the answer. That's right. They shivved Bernie Sanders to make room for Biden. And it did work out. Biden won. All right. So now, no, wait a minute. It didn't work out. That's right. It was Hillary, and then she lost.
Yeah, they
Trump.
shivved him first for Hillary, and then they shivved him again for Biden.
He was double shivved. That's exactly right.
This
is a situation that I will give you some detailed reporting on, and I will also tell you where the tea leaves sit right now. I also will simplify something that's become this pearl-clutching, hand-wringing thing about the convention. And I heard you guys talking about it actually this morning on Nikki's show. And I will make that so much easier for you in the minutes ahead. We're so glad you are here. I will be here for the first hour, then I've got to go to KFI Radio. Kim will take the second hour. But in the first hour, we've got Gary Dietrich, who is the great KGO political analyst. He's now doing CBS television and iHeart Radio. He'll join us bottom of the hour. And Gil Gross will join us top of the second hour. So I have a lot of politics for you. So Kim will talk to Gil. And then finally, we'll have True Crime Corner. And Courtney will be here with that at the bottom of the second hour. So that's kind of the way things shake out. Love to hear your thoughts. This is sort of one of those specific times in which the community that is available to us on this platform is particularly useful. This is not a surprise. The pressure on Joe Biden was immense, and this was not the result of just pressure. This, Biden pulling out, was the result of Biden looking at the stark reality of the numbers. Yep. You can always tell me, and you can email me as you do, Mark, you spend too much time on the polls. Oh my God, why do you talk about polls? Because polls are an indicator often, if the polling is done properly, as to what is going to happen, what the path to victory might be, to use the oft-used expression. And when Biden was shown the actual data, grim as it was, he realized there was no coming back. That's what happened. Now, I'll give you some more reporting on it, and there's some great detailed reporting on it. But essentially, that's what happened. Joe Biden, who has been, I think, a remarkable president from the standpoint of what he's done, he has pushed through in a divided Congress and a divided government. He has pushed through transformative legislation. And you can point to things you wish would have been pushed through also. The infrastructure plan could have been built out more. It could have included any number of things. You know, there were provisions essentially for a lot of negotiation on drug prices, on prescription drug prices. We got it down after all the negotiating to 10. So it'll be ultimately just 10 prescription drugs that will be negotiated on. Now, you could say, well, that's not what we wanted. We wanted prescription drug negotiations on all. Yeah, I get it. But it's a negotiation, and navigating these fraught political waters is something that Biden really did, and he did it effectively. So I'm just saying that these legislative victories were forged of compromise, might be a way to put it. So I'm so impressed with Joe Biden. He surprised me immensely. I mean, he's an institutional Democrat. I don't like that. The institutional nature of both parties lead us to places that don't really do any sort of groundbreaking work for America or Americans. But Joe Biden proved that wrong. Joe Biden proved that you actually could reach across the aisle, even though you'll get your hand slapped, but at least make overtures. And his general disposition was the opposite of Trump. It wasn't to demonize the other side, even as they blocked so much legislation and many of his legislative agenda items. He still moved forward as the veteran of Washington that he was. Now, again, you don't have to agree with every policy point. You might have disagreements with Joe Biden on Gaza, on Middle East policy, on Ukraine. I don't know where you may step aside on Biden. You don't have to ride all the way down the line with him. But he has certainly done things that have been, as I say, transformative. I think that infrastructure bill, and of course Trump talked about an infrastructure bill, Trump talked about a health care plan, Trump talked about all this stuff he was going to do. And he's still talking. But Joe Biden really did it. So I give the guy a lot of credit.
I think Trump will say that it was weak for Biden to step down. Like, that's a position of weakness. But I look at it differently. I think it was a very selfless and strong decision where you're looking at the country instead of your own personal gain.
This is of no
right.
No import and is no relevance. I mean, Trump's scared now. Trump's scared now because there is a real possibility that Kamala Harris can win. Now, I don't see the huge possibility that Kamala Harris can win that a lot of us who kind of drunk on the moment might see. Like, oh my God, this is going to flip everything. I was on a thread with a bunch of journalists today, and one of them was saying it's going to be a landslide. Landslide? What are you smoking, dude? There are no more landslides in America. There are no more landslides. The politics of America are dug in. But I am curious, just at first blush, in the initial hours here, following this momentous decision, and I'll give you more reporting on how it went down in a second. But I am curious, just because we are talking about, we've kind of skipped ahead in the movie to how it would affect various electoral college races. Tony, you have that, the Kornacki stuff? I'm just curious. Let's watch a minute or two of this, and then I'll comment on this, and then I'll tell you why you don't need to worry about this convention. All this hand-wringing about the convention and about... I'll give you a thought on that in a moment. But go ahead, Tony. Do you have it?
If it's Harris or whoever it is as the Democratic nominee, this is the battleground, of course, they'd be walking into. If it's Harris versus Trump, we've talked about this a lot, the core 6 battleground states, every single one of these states was won by Joe Biden in 2020. 5 of them, Biden had flipped from Donald Trump in 2016. So obviously Harris, if she is the Democratic nominee, doesn't have to win all of these states. But these are the states where I referenced that polling that was showing Biden down in many cases, mid-single digits, sometimes even worse. She's going to have to win a number of these states. Maybe those 3 Midwest states that could potentially hold it for Democrats. There's different combinations here. The other challenge, though, for Harris, or again, whoever the Democratic nominee is, the polling that had come out in the last couple of weeks was also suggesting, and there wasn't enough of it to be definitive at all, but it was suggesting that Democrats were starting to get into trouble outside of the core battleground states. And in particular, there's been polling from Virginia that showed a close race, a tied race in some cases, or even Donald Trump ahead by a couple points. Virginia thought to be a solidly blue state. New Hampshire, Joe Biden won New Hampshire by 7 points back in 2020. Was thought to be safely Democratic. Polling there had a very competitive race. There were rumblings about maybe the statewide vote in Maine, maybe about Minnesota, maybe even about New Mexico. So again, there wasn't a ton of polling there. There were some indications, but that's the other order of business for whoever emerges as the Democratic candidate. Can they make sure there's no trouble in those states and then solidify enough of these swing states to win the election?
Okay, there you go. That's the latest. I mean, it is going to be Kamala Harris. We all understand that. I mean, there's this thing that, well, it should be open, and then who's going to run against her? Tell me who's going to run against Kamala Harris. It is political suicide. to run against Kamala Harris.
OCB not happy. Says the elite class will decide, not the primary voters, all 14 million of them. Let them eat cake.
Right, and there is that position, and that's not wrong. I mean, the elite class makes it sound particularly like, it's Marie Antoinette and her advisors sitting in some ivory tower. I mean, but you're not wrong, OCB. You're not wrong, but you're talking about the party politics, and this is what I'm getting to. The politics of the Democratic Party and the politics of the Republican Party is decided by a core group of people who have been with the party for a long time. It's not just donors. It's the Pelosi's of the world, those who count votes and also do the political calculus as to what is the best path, who's the best candidate, et cetera. Now, that doesn't mean they choose the best candidate always. It doesn't even mean they choose the best candidate for America always. It is the way, and it's a flawed way, in which these parties are set up. They're set up as institutions. But because of that, there is no competition right now that would take on Kamala Harris. No one. No one who wants a political future within that institution that I just described is going to take on Kamala Harris. It's that simple. If you want to take on Kamala Harris, you are done in the Democratic Party. You'll have no support from that institution. You're done. And the same was true on the Republican side. If you took on Trump in any way, what were they going to do? They were going to primary you. They were going to go after you. That was his position when he was president. And remember, anybody who even disagreed with him, he saw to it that they got primaried. So you're right, OCB. The institution of the Democrats is deciding this. There are good reasons why Kamala, again, from an institutional standpoint, is a smart choice. The first of which is she has access to all that money, and that money helps tell a story. When you want to win the presidency, you need to tell a story. Trump had a populist story. Biden had a return to normalcy story. And Kamala needs to find that story which she'd like to tell. You tell that story effectively, both on the stump and through media buys and other ways to get the message out, and that's why money's important. Manilow, 7. First of all, big shout out. Thank you for the super chat, is that?
Super
the
chat.
Script has flipped, says Manilow 77. The comparison between the two candidates is obvious. Let's hope this energizes the youth vote toward victory. Vote blue, says Manilow 77. Wow. Well, that is the host, Harry Magnan.
Big shout out.
Big shout out to Harry. Who's the old man now, Harry says. The $5 super chat. Still want a cognitive test? Yeah, I mean, now Trump is the old man who digresses and goes off and talks about sharks and, you're drowning and Hannibal Lecter. I mean, it was
Washing
unbelievable.
Machines, yeah.
I mean, Trump, at least if the media will give it any coverage. I mean, I know Trump's good for clicks, but he is truly unhinged. So, Trevor Starr in Hollywood, due to Joe Biden's major announcement, Trevor Starr in Hollywood says, with a 1010 super chat, and for the good of the country, I have decided, Trevor, he means, to postpone my much lesser major announcement. Details TV, yes. Trevor Starr in Hollywood was to have made a major announcement today, as many who are regulars of the show are probably aware, but now he is advising us that he is putting off his major announcement because of the other major announcement. That is very good of you, Trevor. The insistence by Joe Biden that he was never going to leave and it was full steam ahead, something happened, right? For 3 weeks, he maintained that. And Nancy Pelosi and others said, we're going to give the president more time to make his decision. And he kept saying, I've made my decision. I'm staying in the race. We're going to give you more time to make a decision. Maybe you didn't hear me. I am staying. We're going to win. I'm all in. All that stuff. We're going to give you more time to make the decision. I mean, clearly you knew what the party leadership felt. And as it turns out, and this is reporting from Politico, Biden, of course, at his house at the Delaware Shore, met with Steve Richetti, who has been with Biden since his days in the Senate. And Mike Donnellan arrived as well. And both of these guys have been by Biden throughout key decision-making, whether he was going to seek the presidency in 2016, for example, also in 2020. And they presented new information to him. This is even as he was fighting COVID-19. And the information was damning. They presented new concerns from lawmakers, updates on fundraising operations that had slowed considerably. We've reported on it here. They carried the campaign's own polls. Remember, I talked to you about this before, that the campaign has polling. I know I'm sharing all this polling, and you guys give me a hard time. I spend too much time in the polls, whatever. The campaign has polling, good polling. And those polls, the Biden polling, came back this week and showed his path to victory in November was gone. According to 5 people familiar with the matter who, like others who Politico interviewed for this reporting, were granted anonymity, this produced several questions during the exchange. But the only other people with Biden in the residence when he arose on Sunday were Jill Biden and the 2 other trusted aides I mentioned. Also, Chief of Staff, Deputy Chief of Staff, Annie Tomasini, and Assistant to the First Lady, Anthony Bernal. At 1:45 in the afternoon, Biden notified a somewhat larger group of close aides that he had decided the night before to end his quest for another term. This is again on Sunday when he made that announcement. Reading his letter and thanking them for their service, a minute later, before any other campaign and White House staffers could be notified, he posted the historic letter from his campaign account on the social media site X. So that's the way it went down. It wasn't that the president had grown tired of the drip of defections within his own party, they say, although he had. It was that Biden himself was finally convinced of what so many other Democrats had come to believe since his poor debate performance last month. He couldn't win. When the campaign commissioned new battleground polling over the last week, it was the first time they'd done surveys in some key states in more than 2 months. According to 2 people familiar with the surveys, the numbers were grim, showing Biden not just trailing in all 6 critical swing states, but collapsing in places like Virginia and New Mexico, where Democrats had not planned on needing to spend massive resources to even win there. With that knowledge and the awareness that more party elders, including more of his former Senate colleagues, would pile on the public pressure campaign, a sudden exit offered the president his best chance to make it appear that the decision came on his own terms. So, that's a bit of what went into the decision-making. He realized the realities. But what are the realities for Kamala? And what are the realities for the others? I've just told you from a practical standpoint, no one's going to take on Kamala Harris. We'll talk to Gary Dietrich about it. Mm-hmm. Anybody who wants a political future with the Democratic Party won't take on Kamala Harris. But I'm curious as to your thoughts. I know Kamala Harris isn't the first pick for many, but she is the pick that makes the most sense given some of these variables that I described. Name recognition, access to money, and now look at all of the endorsements she got. Pelosi's endorsed her today, and I mean, there's a...
So has Whitmer.
Yeah, parade of endorsements. Look at those who she, in this open convention, it's going to be wide open. It's going to be open to Whitmer and Newsom, and then they're all endorsing Kamala, just as I told you. And they all will. Unfortunately, America will not vote for a black woman from California, says Mary. I'm concerned about that as well. Mm-hmm. I'm concerned about that as well.
Yeah.
And Jose says this. Biden is a top 10 president. We got rid of a top 10 president. And you know something? I think it's a really interesting fact. It's something that we discuss on this show occasionally. The fact, I mean, in the context of a presidential campaign, I think it's true that Joe Biden as an administrator was brilliant. I mean, he got all that legislation through that I talked about. He got all these various executive orders, which seem right on. He has a far more progressive agenda than I would have thought he'd have. I think he realizes the threat to this nation coming from the other side of the aisle. And sadly, his ability to articulate and to campaign has been hobbled by his age. I don't know what degree he is, he's lost mental acuity, or I really don't know. But I know his ability to articulate things, I know that has left him. And you cannot win an election with that diminishment that we've seen. Debbie, for a $50 super chat, big shout out. Steve in Idaho. This is from Debbie and Steve. I think Steve communicates on Debbie's account, Kim, I think is what's going on. Steve in Idaho, I got an idea to help Democrats. Use your influence on the music industry to bring back the old folk songs of peace, harmony, love, tolerance, like Richie Havens, Tracy Chapman, Peter, Paul, and Mary. The power of lyrics. Yeah, the power of lyrics. Come on, people now. Smile on your brother. Everybody get together. Try to love one another right now. Am I right, people? Smash the like button. Start with the love at home.
Iron rod.
Yeah. Anyone wanting a political future won't want to be her VP either. What a mess. Maybe. That's a great question for Gary Dietrich. Will you make sure I ask that question, Kim? Cindy Temple's question? Mm-hmm. She's making it as a statement, but I'll ask him as a question. Anyone wanting a political future won't want to be her VP. What a mess. I do think there has to be, you have to get past the mess as quickly as possible. And what can one do but sort of consolidate support and, get on the bus? And I think that's what they're going to do. Trevor Starr in Hollywood sent me a new drop.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. For the first 24 hours of Kamala Harris's small donor online donations have reached over $80 million, more than any single day. The K-Hive is buzzing, says Agolf Twitler. Big shout out. Wow. The K-Hive is buzzing, Kim. And Trump, of course,
Donald Trump is now the oldest guy, also the weirdest guy.
Yes, there's your new drop from Trevor Starr.
That's pretty good.
Donald Trump is now the oldest guy, also the weirdest guy.
There you go.
Gary his sound is so good, isn't it? I mean, just listen to the resonance.
The way he talks is so perfect. Yes.
Perfect.
All right, everyone. Smash the like button. Kim's news, and then Gary Dietrich. I'm also sitting on a couple of other pieces of video, I guess. We'll try to get to those as well. Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. Vice President Kamala Harris is not publicly speaking about the 2024 ticket just yet in her first on-camera appearance since President Biden dropped out of the 2024 race. She praised him and said his legacy is unmatched. Harris made her comments at an NCAA event at the White House today. She's emerging as the front runner to be the Democratic nominee for president, and she'll visit her campaign headquarters in Wilmington, Delaware today. It'll be her first campaign engagement since President Biden dropped out of the race and endorsed Kamala Harris for president. The campaign was renamed Harris for President after the announcement on Sunday, and campaign staff changed their affiliation to the Harris campaign in communications with media. Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheadle is on the hot seat on Capitol Hill. In a House hearing today, she called the assassination attempt on former President Trump the most significant operational failure of the agency in decades. Cheadle is facing bipartisan outrage and widespread calls for her to resign over the failure to protect Donald Trump at his Pennsylvania rally. Delta canceling or delaying more flights again today. Most airlines have recovered from last week's global tech outage, but Delta's CEO says technical issues are impacting Delta's crew tracking software. He is apologizing for those problems. Here in California, thousands of Disneyland employees have voted overwhelmingly in favor of authorizing a strike. Votes were cast last Friday by about 14,000 members of an alliance of 4 unions. 99% of the employees, also called cast members, voted to allow their union leadership to call for a strike. The unions represent custodians and ride operators, candy makers, merchandise clerks, and other employees. A strike would mark the first major work stoppage at Disneyland since 1984, with that strike lasting more than 3 weeks. The employees have been working without a contract since June 16th, and the contract negotiations will continue this week.
Well, you never like to think of those Disney characters,
No,
disgruntled because it's
they're
such
unhappy.
a happy place. Yeah.
It's supposed to be the happiest place on earth.
Yeah, but
What happened?
You gotta knock down Mickey a couple dollars. Oh yeah, exactly.
I mean, sad. It's not so happy after all.
Well, I
San
know.
Jose is now the first city in the state to allow property owners self-accessory dwelling units as separate homes. The units, also known as ADUs, can be found all over the city, with homeowners usually renting them out as a way to get more income. A new law was passed this year allowing those property owners to sell the ADUs as condos, with the effort being made to help with the housing crisis in San Jose and around California. So San Jose became the first city to adopt an ordinance to allow that law to take effect. Supporters say it offers a chance at home ownership to those who otherwise would never be able to afford to buy a home in California. So you can now, in San Jose, sell your ADU. Multiple wildfires causing havoc in Southern California. Hundreds of acres burned, several homes damaged in fires that broke out Sunday in various locations in the Inland Empire. In Riverside, the Hawarden fire ripped through 500 acres quickly. It burned through 3 homes in that area. Evacuation orders have been issued for dozens of homes around that fire, as well as the Corona area, where the Eagle fire has burned hundreds of acres as well. NBA legend LeBron James will carry the Stars and Stripes at the opening ceremony of the Summer Olympics in Paris. James called it an incredible honor to be the first men's basketball player to carry the American flag at the Olympics. Team USA's female flag bearer will be announced tomorrow. And as expected, Twisters with an S is tops at the box office. The Glenn Powell-led action flick is expected to gross $80.5 million at theaters nationwide in its premiere weekend.
Man, that Glenn Powell with Hitman and then this, he's
hot
he's on
to
fire.
trot. Illumination's Despicable Me 4 and Pixar's highly anticipated sequel Inside Out 2 round out the top 3 films at the weekend box office. That's because it's summer and everyone's trying to do something with their kids. That's why the kids' movies are still in the mix there. This report is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. What's in the cup today, Mark Thompson?
I had the espresso. I've had 4 espresso shots, so I've kind of put it aside for now, but I can tell you it was divine. Oh, and we're serving all weekend and all week. We just made a fresh brew of the cold brew. The cold brew, we let it steep for 19 hours, and it's perfect right now. Just had Courtney had a glass. I had a glass this morning as well. The cold brew is available on their website, CoachellaValleyCoffee.com, with instructions. It's so easy. I mean, to make. It's like super easy. It's basically a bag. You just let it steep, and before you know it, you've got this great cold coffee. So Ready to Brew Cold Brew is there on the site, along with all the other great coffee, best coffee on earth, and tea as well. Anything
Today,
you
I have
order.
the lemon with mint tea today, and it's amazing.
Yes. Anything you order at CoachellaValleyCoffee.com, you'll get 10% off anything and everything using our discount code MARKT. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com, discount code MARKT.
I'm Kim McAllister. This is The Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show. The Mark Thompson Show.
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at?
Stay at home and get baked.
Love that we have reconnected with this guy from KGO Radio, the longtime KGO political analyst. Now he's all grown up. He's the political analyst for CBS Television as well as the iHeart Radio Network. He's so good to spend Mondays with us for a little while. How about it for Gary Dietrich, everybody? What an exciting time to be a political analyst. Oh, my God. I mean, you know, you've seen a lot in your career, but this is truly new ground, right?
I know, Mark. I know to all of our watchers, listeners, the assorted wonderful folks, I don't look like I could have gone through now. This is my 9th presidential election cycle, but it's true. and nothing, and of course, as you know, Mark, even having worked on inside the campaign presidentially. Now, this is, Mark, we don't even, people say off the map. There is no map. We're in a different universe. It's completely, it's, you know, like the old Star Trek thing. It's way, way, way out there. So it's this weekend. My only request has been, and I want you to know, I did this not only on my own behalf, Mark, but on behalf of esteemed talk show hosts and the rest. I said, listen, can we just leave any further craziness for Monday mornings? Does it have to be every weekend we get into this stuff? Seriously.
I just had the report. I thought Politico did some good reporting, which essentially, just to boil it down, brought us to the moment that Biden essentially realized that he was not going to win, that his own internal polling indicated this, and with his closest advisors, he made this decision. But what happens next is fascinating. I was saying that all of this stuff about open convention and you'll have Gavin and Whitmer, it's ridiculous. No one who wants a political future in the Democratic Party is going to take on Kamala Harris, right?
That's exactly right, Mark. I mean, look, make no mistake about it. I mean, Gavin Newsom, people don't know this, happens to live about 2 miles away from me right now, okay? And then before he moves to Marin County, that is, officially, all the boxes I think are in process. But here's the deal. That tour bus is gassed up, warmed up, ready to go. And as of November 6th, whatever happens, that thing pulls out of the station. You know, we've talked about this for a long time. That is going to happen. But you're absolutely right. Taking on a sitting vice president, now one that's not only been endorsed by the sitting president himself, but as I'm sure you may now have heard, Mark, as of today, Nancy Pelosi is now on that train. The Clintons are on that train. We're waiting to hear from, of course, Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, and, you know, the last big, gigantic standard bearer yet to be heard from in the party, Barack Obama. Most people feel like over the next few weeks, those things are going to trickle in and fall into line. Congress just got back today, by the way, which is why probably Jeffries and Schumer have not yet put out an endorsement. You know, they want to make sure, right, that they're representing their respective caucuses in the Senate and the House. But, you know, it looks like all the ducks are, you know, lining up for Kamala Harris. We've talked about campaign funds. Those will, it's not an automatic transfer. That's a misnomer, but it's easier to move those into the Harris ticket fund. So, you know, everybody right now, of course, is on to talking about who her VP choice will be.
Well, I do want to get to that. And before you leave funds completely, it's not nothing that there's been such a rush of funding into the Kamala Harris campaign. You can tell a lot by the way the money is flowing in, can't you?
Yeah, well, on that, Mark, really, I mean, the polling was one thing. You've mentioned that for Biden. But the other gigantic reality check was the second half of that phrase, checks. The checks stopped coming in. And the big donors made this very clear. The minute Joe steps aside, we're going to turn the spigot back on. You know, a lot of that's being attributed to Kamala Harris, but to be fair about it, the donors really made clear, many of them, honestly, we don't care who it is, but it's got to be somebody other than Joe. And when that happens, the checks are going to come. And reportedly, nearly $50 million since Biden stepped aside just yesterday.
Now to the number 2 on the ticket. Give me some thoughts on that.
Well, you know, I think if you look at just the strategic aspects of this, you have to go to the big three. You have to go to the so-called blue wall of Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. I mean, everybody inside and outside of the Democratic Party has made clear We must win those 3 or it is game over. So what does that mean? Well, you look at the polling right now, and the early polling, stuff that was done even before this weekend on Trump Harris, and it was true about Trump Biden too. Trump has edges in all 3 of those. Now, under Harris, the early polling is basically, this is not new polling, it's aggregations of the last few weeks, has him up slightly in Michigan and in Wisconsin, but at 4 points in Pennsylvania. So where does that lead us, Mark? I think the governor, the Democratic governor of Pennsylvania, Shapiro, I think would be the early odds-on favorite. Because remember, Biden was working hard on Pennsylvania, a lot. I mean, there all the time. And he was still down by 4 points. You got J.D. Vance now on the Republican side from the neighboring state of Ohio. It's been said that he's going to be essentially parked in Pennsylvania, making that, the ultimate sort of throwdown. We'll see. But I think right now the odds-on favorites are Shapiro and then Governor Beshear out of Kentucky. Kentucky, they're not going to win Kentucky, that is the Democrats, but he would be a signal, right? A moderating force on the ticket. We'll see where that goes. Just to clean this all up, even though, Gavin came out yesterday and officially endorsed Harris, people keep asking me the question, well, could he be the VP? One gigantic problem happens to be standing between Gavin and that. That's the 12th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution that says you cannot have the presidential and VP nominees from the same state. Trump ran into that with Rubio, so that is off the table.
By the way, I love, just as an aside, that you can be a felon and be president, but not from the same state, though. We have these, it's a bizarre list of regulations and rules that govern around the presidency, and some of them are so porous and others seem so rigid, and you've just described a rigid one. I'm seeing something, I just want to knock it down now. I'm seeing it in our audience. This is from Phineas. Mark, could there be a reverse ticket, Harris president and Biden VP? That's ridiculous. With all respect, I say it's ridiculous. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but Biden is viewed as an encumbrance. He's viewed as a weight. I mean, it would be, you want to get rid of the negatives. You don't want to actually bring them back onto the ticket.
Yeah, absolutely. Less than zero chance of that happening. I mean, for the reasons that everybody now should be well aware of, his capacities were deemed such by people in his own party. Yes, the major donors. Yes, members of vote. 2/3 of Democrats actually in recent weeks said, no can do. President's got to step aside. So no chance of him doing that, nor any desire on the part of the Harris team to do it. So you're absolutely right, Mark. Yeah, that's off the table.
I'd love to have Mark Kelly, says John. Give me the arithmetic on Mark Kelly. Wow, he's an attractive candidate in so many ways. How does he work with what you've talked about, which is some of the political calculus?
Well, Arizona is important. Don't make no mistake about that. But not nearly as important as that blue wall. I mean, right now, there's an estimation. If you look at the polling over the last few weeks, okay, Trump's hand has strengthened. It's strengthened after the debate. It's strengthened after the assassination attempt. And so in key battleground states, and Arizona has traditionally been seen as one of those, there is a sense now within the Democratic Party, okay, we may have to write off Nevada. It looks like that is getting out of reach. Same with North Carolina. They were making noises about that. That's not looking good. Arizona is now slipping in that category. It's not there yet. Could Mark Kelly pull it back? Possibly, yes. But the bottom line is, Mark, it doesn't have nearly the electoral vote power of a Pennsylvania, especially, as well as a Michigan and a Wisconsin.
What's happening, Gary Dietrich? Why are the Democrats losing so many states that were cleanly in the blue column before?
Well, part of it, there's no getting around the fact, with all due respect to the sitting president, part of it was Biden himself. I mean, the contrast, especially after the June 27th debate, became more than stark. And so some of these states that were kind of in that wiggling middle, Mark, started quickly sliding even more into Trump's direction. That's part of it. A lot of what's going to determine this calculus, Mark, and she's, by the way, under no obligation to select a VP, today, tomorrow, this week. It would have to happen prior to the official nominating of that vice president formally, presumably now at the convention. Presumably they're abandoning this notion of a virtual deal online by the almost 4,000 delegates beforehand. That's not formally off the table, but you're hearing a lot of rumblings. Okay, let's put that in the back. Let's put that on the back burner. That was to try to preserve and protect and salvage Joe's candidacy. But I think right now, honestly, Mark, in terms of the optics, they'd rather do it at the convention. You want that gigantic roll call vote with Kamala presumably put over the top by, it's usually the home state delegation, which would make that California, and the same with the VP, right? So that's what you want. That's what a convention is supposed to be all about, with all the other bells and whistles aside.
That was Trump's move. You know, he waited on the J.D. Vance announcement until the convention had started. Because I mentioned the convention and you've mentioned the Democratic convention, I haven't spoken to you since the RNC, and I'm curious what you thought. It seemed, let me give you my 20 seconds on it, which is very well, I thought, choreographed. I mean, again, those who view these sort of cartoonish characters like Hulk Hogan and Dana White, this is toxic masculinity. I mean, it's a very male party. Everything's very masculine, you know. But that's who they've got, and they parade them out. But it seemed to peter out, and I include the former president Trump's speech. I mean, it seemed to go out with a whimper as he, just droned on, and he did his Hannibal Lecter thing, and it was way late on the East Coast. People were probably asleep anyway. Give me your thoughts on the RNC.
Yeah, well, I think you have it essentially right, Mark. The only caveat to the mail deal, and certainly there was an attempt to close out, or certainly a major emphasis on blue collar and young male voters on that last night. Absolutely, no question about it. I keep thinking to myself, I honestly, Mark, there's times I have to bang my head against the wall and saying, okay, am I watching an official party convention here with Hulk Hogan tearing off his T-shirt, Trump walking out to the Elvis lights, behind him? I mean, it's just, there's times when I just think to myself, man, when I was in San Diego at that 92 convention, when Bob Dole and Libby Dole walked out on the stage, and I just see Bob Dole, God rest his soul, quality folks, the Doles. But no, that would never have happened, okay? So here's my thing. I think you're essentially right. The only caveat I'd say to the young male and the Hulk Hogan, whatever, Dana White thing, was they did have a night focused a lot on the ladies. When you had, especially the endorsement, really important, of Nikki Haley, you had, the young YouTube influencer come out. That was deemed by even Van Jones, Democrat kind of, leaning guy on CNN, said, man, that right there hurt. That is going to really help Republicans. So the thing about it is, I think it built well. And you even heard a lot of this on the Democratic side. Man, this is kind of an intimidating show being put on until the last 2/3 of Donald Trump's 93-minute record-setting address. The first third of it, when he said, this is the only time I'm going to recount in detail the assassination attempt, that was pretty touching to many people's minds, including Democrats. I mean, it was a sobering moment. It was a touching moment. But then when he shifted into full rally mode for the last hour of his address, I would say, and I agree with many observers who said it was a missed opportunity. It should have been toned way down, in my view. He would have served himself and the convention and his party much better simply to say, look, I am going to now be the unifying candidate, recount some of his things he's accomplished in the past, say here's 3 or 4 major priorities for the future, and leave it at that.
They all took their time bashing Biden. Now he's not even running, LOL, says Captain. Yeah, I mean, they do, now that Biden is no longer relevant to it all, they do face a different kind of strategy that they're having to cobble together. Now, Harris doesn't come out of nowhere. I'm sure they're ready to go, but it definitely presents a different, plotting a different course forward, right, Gary?
Yeah, the last little caveat I'll say about the campaign is exactly your point, Mark. The saving grace for Trump and the Republicans on the last night of the convention was that his last hour of the speech came so late that probably half the country had already checked out, was getting ready for the next work day, and I'm guessing that a lot of people didn't even watch that last hour of Trump. So, they probably had that going for them. As far as Harris goes, make no mistake about it. They already have the playbook. The playbook has been sitting there on the shelf, ready to go. Everybody, including the RNC, knew that Biden dropping out was becoming more and more likely. the Oppo research was not only done, by the way, and the book was ready to go on Harris, but on Newsom, on Shapiro. I mean, those playbooks are all sitting on the shelf, as they would be for the Democrats as well. I mean, I worked inside campaigns. The Oppo research was done 6 months ago, okay? So now it's rolling it out. They're going to definitely go hard on immigration. Why? Because that polls so well for Trump, and because, of course, much to the chagrin, by the way, of the Harris team, when Biden assigned her that task of border czar, so to speak, there's a lot of people inside her own office that we don't want it. Please keep it, But that's going to be there. So they're going to take some of those major issues, and those will become the initial foundation of the attacks on Harris.
Well, I was one of the people who said you've essentially dumped these intractable problems on the vice president's desk. So you're going to handle the border crisis. You're going to handle the opioid crisis. I mean, please, dude, come on. I mean, now, to her credit, she did what they always do. They go to Latin America. They try to talk about, migration issues, et cetera. But the real notion that she could, that anyone could put a dent in something that, is being used as a political football anyway. I mean, I think her best counter move is to say, hey, we had an immigration bill, but you, the GOP, nixed it. It was your bill, but your guy, Donald Trump, your Lord and Savior, he's the one who made it go away. That's about the best you can do as a counter, but you're right. They're going to hang that on her for sure. So,
yeah, and she's not going to use that. I mean, she's going to try to avoid that. She's going to go hard on abortion. There's absolutely no question about that. And she's going to go hard on DJT. Do you want Donald J. Trump? It's going to be democracy Trump. It's basically hard negatives on the top of the ticket. Those are going to be, initially at least, the two main issues you're going to hear a lot out of a Harris campaign.
How much hay politically can the Democrats make of Donald Trump's drifting off, aged aspect of who he is?
Well, of course, he negated that substantially, as Biden attempted to do when he brought Harris on board. That was part of the reason for her being decades younger. I mean, the reality of it is, it was remarkable to me to see Trump and Vance sitting in the same VIP box, knowing that Vance is, Mark, this is hard to believe, almost 4 decades younger than Donald Trump. I mean, 39 years old, right? And so, I mean, I think that was part of the appeal of a Vance, was to try to blunt some of that. But that will come back. The reason that's going to be hard to stick is, well, that's the same kind of guy, if not worse, that you served under the last 3.5 years. So now you're making that argument. That's why that's going to be difficult for the Harris ticket. I don't see them using the age thing much because of that.
Interesting. That's fascinating. So as you handicap this now, they certainly have a chance to win now with Harris that they did not have before with Biden, correct?
Oh, the numbers already demonstrate that. The challenge for the Harris ticket is going to be, and people say, well, she's already been vetted. She's been in the VP office, Naval Observatory. She lives in Washington for the last 3.5 years. All right, anybody that's worked at the presidential campaign level, it's all about the top of the ticket. I mean, Lloyd Bentsen did not do a lot to help Mike Dukakis, okay? I mean, we could go down a long list of VPs. It's always about the top of the ticket. She will be heavily scrutinized. The files will be reopened, and it's going to be a rough initial take for Harris, because a lot of the things that people wouldn't have paid much attention to over the last 3.5 years, the attack dogs are going to come out.
So the days of, I was saying this before, of landslides are over. There is an exuberance that follows a kind of change like this. And you go, you rah, 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 look at all the money. Oh my God, she's going to do this, she's going to do that. And everybody's going to get on board. Woohoo, it's going to be a landslide. She still trails, and she has to win those 3 states that you mentioned. And it is a fact that, and this is the question I have for you, that landslides, it seems to me, in this nation now, the way we're so dug in, landslides don't really happen anymore.
Well, that's exactly right, Mark. And I mean, going into this, regardless of who is going to run, everything else, as we say, the near split is baked in currently to the American electorate. Now, interestingly, depending on the poll you look at, when RFK is thrown into the mix, a lot of these polls, by the way, people need to understand, when you see people like Biden was 2.5 points down to Trump last week, well, that's without RFK. Okay, same thing with Harris. Polling averages from the Hill and people like that, she's behind by 2 points. You throw RFK into the Hill's polling average, and they'll tell you it's a 6-point difference between Trump and Harris. So that's going to continue to be an issue. RFK's role in this race continues right now to be an advantage for Trump.
It's interesting because RFK, you would think, just looking at positions, would be, his constituency would seem to be made up on some level of Trumpies as well. But you're saying, no, he's really taking more from the Kamala vote or the Biden vote.
Yeah. Right, Mark. He does draw from both. Make no mistake about it. It's just that he tends to get more middle of the road, more disaffected voters who consider themselves true independents, who might otherwise shy away from Trump and lean towards the Democratic ticket. But again, the caveat to all of these numbers is we are not going to know much and for another 2 weeks or so, 2.5, 3 weeks, until we get new, fresh numbers with Kamala Harris now as the nominee, not Joe Biden.
So it's 2 weeks would be where we circle on the calendar and we visit it. We visit those numbers then, and then we visit it, this entire question as to where the numbers shake out at that time. That'll be the first legit indicator in your judgment. Yeah,
there'll be some early polling this week, Mark. But remember, she's not even been accepted by the leaders of her own party yet. So I think we have to. You got to pump the brakes a little on some of this stuff because, again, the Speaker of the House, the leader of the Democrats in the Senate, okay, they have not endorsed her yet. So you got to let that settle this week, and then the real serious polling will begin at the end of this week, next week. Then you give that about a week. I know we want snap polls in our day, but anything truly credible, Mark, I think you're probably looking at about 2 weeks out.
Gary Dietrich is the political analyst for CBS television, also for iHeart Radio. I want to hear his opinion on Buttigieg, says Natalie. Give me 20 seconds on Buttigieg.
Okay. Well, Buttigieg, by the way, I'll say I'm the political analyst for CBS California. There's other esteemed political analysts in our network as well who cover other things, but I do talk about national as well as state stuff. But just so I don't want Ed O'Keefe and the rest of our guys in Washington to feel like I'm stepping on their toes. Okay. So here's the deal. Buttigieg. Okay. Buttigieg is not going to be a VP. He is a cabinet secretary right now. He would not add much in most people's estimation to a Harris ticket. You've got to carry one of those key states or be somebody that can move the needle there. And Pete himself, I don't think, would see himself at this juncture as that figure.
He is one of their best surrogates, though, isn't he, Gary?
Oh, absolutely. Look, you're going to see him out on the trail. You're going to see Gavin out on the trail a lot. But that's going to be their role, not the number 2 slot on a Harris ticket.
Find him on CBS. God damn it, he's from CBS television, and I'm going to go to my grave saying it. CBS California Politics. They go to Gary Dietrich. Also, iHeart Radio, the political analyst. I'm going to work at iHeart right now. So, love you, Gary. Thank you. We'll talk next Monday. All right.
Okay, buddy.
All right. So long. Good stuff. Gary Dietrich. Wow.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Yeah. So here's what's happening. I want to catch up with any comments that I might have missed.
We got one from Wes.
She was California's top cop, and some thought she was too tough on crime. Wes, yeah, thank you for that, for the $5 super chat, too, because we are a crowd-funded show, so every time you give us a super chat, it does help us. Wes, I would say this about that, and I think this is really the way it shakes out. Tell me if you agree. We've evolved now to a place where those who are tough on law and order actually have an edge over others. So one of the things that's dogged the libs is that we in the liberal camp oftentimes can be associated with not being tough enough on crime. That's why you bring in somebody who was, as you say, California's top cop, and many thought she was too tough on crime. Can't be too tough on crime now. I mean, look at the conversation around what's going on in San Francisco, San Jose, Oakland. I mean, it just is all about being tough on crime. So I think her history actually plays well to this moment, if you want to think of it that way. I'm concerned about her past with Willie Brown. May come back to bite her. I hope not, but doubt it. But doubt it is forgotten, says Rain. Well, you know how I feel about this. I don't care who's sleeping with who. I don't care whether they're sleeping with somebody else every hour. I don't care if I so don't care. And no one else should care either. And this whole idea that, but he's old and she's young, it doesn't matter. What the hell does that have to do with anything?
First of all, so what? And second of all, are you saying that it's okay for Trump to cheat on all of his wives and sleep with porn stars and Playboy bunnies, but it's not okay for Kamala Harris to have had a consenting relationship?
Right,
exactly.
Right? I mean, you look across the aisle and the guys are, it's a brag. He's knocking down. Look, he's bragging to Billy Bush about grabbing him by the pee. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. But women are held to a different standard. This is how it will be.
Just what Becky is saying. I see mentions about her past with Willie Brown, hypocrisy at its finest if the other guy is a felon, cheater, etc. So, thank you. If Willie Brown is all they've got, says Knit One Pearl One, it's pathetic. She was, 29? Way an adult. She could date who she wanted. Age difference, so what at that point? Exactly. Thank you. We're all in agreement on that. I love that. All right, good. All right, Kim's news, and then she will take the helm because I have to go over to iHeart. I hope they choose Mark Kelly, says Deirdre. Yeah, I love Mark Kelly. It sounded to me as though I really love Mark Kelly. Like I think he'd be a good choice for president, but be that as it may, although I'd love to see a woman as president, honestly. Whitmer, Harris, perhaps, as it turns out, it might all work out. But anyway, my point with Mark Kelly is I'd love to see him, but based on the conversation with Gary, it sounds like a Josh Shapiro might be more on the inside because they're trying to deliver Pennsylvania, essentially. Gretchen Whitmer with Josh Shapiro as her VP, says Tony, and thank you for the super chat.
Big shout out.
We need heavy hitters, 2 governors from swing states. Kamala can be U.S. Attorney General. Well, Tony's got a whole plan. By the way, I love governors as presidents. I think and I love governors as candidates. So I'm with you on that, Tony. Governors know how to hit a budget. Governors know how to deal with a lot of things from an administrative standpoint that presidents should know how to deal with, but they don't. I mean, look at the guys who end up as president. A reality game show host who is just good on camera or good on television. So, but as you just heard, the reason that's not going to happen is Kamala is the heir apparent, and those people whom you've talked about, Josh Shapiro, Gretchen Whitmer, they're not going to run against, and there would be no apparatus by which they would be lifted and put in place above Kamala Harris. It is Kamala Harris. That's why I was saying all this hand-wringing and, it's so exciting, it's going to be an open convention. No, it's a fait accompli. It really is. And that's just politics in this age. So, Kim's news in the next hour, the great Gil Gross, who has terrific political takes. We're doing a lot of politics because this has been a titanic, a massive, seismic weekend in American politics. So Gil will be along as well. And then your palate cleanser will be True Crime Corner. Courtney joins at the bottom of the next hour. Smash the like button if you would.
Smash it with your iron rod.
We're a crowd-funded show, and I will tell you, I so appreciate all of you who are part of our Patreon and PayPal support line. You guys, we run your names at the end of every show. I say it to many. I say it on the air, but I want you to know I say it off the air. We would not be here without your support. So you can find click-throughs to both Patreon and PayPal under all our videos, and you can become part of the community that supports us. And you can also find us at themarkthompsonshow.com, and there are click-throughs there. But you can go right under this video, and boom, there's a click-through to Patreon and one to PayPal as well. And I appreciate all the super stickers and super chats. And if you don't have any way to financially support the show, that's fine. Share the show. Share it on Facebook. Maybe it's a short. Maybe it's a segment you saw. We break out all the videos. Share them to wherever you are in your social media world, and that helps us grow the show. And it costs nothing to do it, and then you support us that way. Love this community of support, and I look forward to us being around for a long time because of the community of support. All right, Kim's News. And then the next hour in her hands with Gil Gross, the great political mind, and Courtney will be along with True Crime Corner. Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. President Biden endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris after dropping out of the 2024 presidential race. This comes after the president released a letter on X saying it was time for him to end his re-election bid and focus on the rest of his presidency. The Democratic National Convention is only 4 weeks away, and it's unclear whether the party will back Vice President Harris or opt for an open primary. Meanwhile, endorsements are rolling in. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear endorsing Vice President Harris for president. The Democrat telling MSNBC's Morning Joe the contrast between Harris and those running on the other side couldn't be more clear. The endorsement from Beshear comes as there's speculation over whether he could serve as her running mate. And here in California, lawmakers are reacting to President Biden's decision to drop his re-election bid. Governor Gavin Newsom calling President Biden an extraordinary, history-making president and a leader who fought hard for working people. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass said President Biden has been one of the most successful and consequential presidents in American history, and that Los Angeles residents have benefited directly from his leadership. San Francisco Mayor London Breed saying she agrees with President Biden's decision to support Vice President Kamala Harris to be the next Democratic nominee. Mayor Breed also said it's time for Democrats to unite and focus on winning this election. Senator J.D. Vance will hold his first solo rally since being selected as former President Trump's running mate. The event will be held in Vance's hometown of Middletown, Ohio. It'll also be Vance's first public appearance since President Biden announced his decision to end his re-election bid. Artificial intelligence is identifying cancer with more accuracy than doctors. Research done by UCLA shows an AI tool identified prostate cancer with 84% accuracy, compared to 67% accuracy for cases detected by physicians. The software, called Unfold AI, made by Avenda Health in California, uses an AI algorithm to visualize the likelihood of cancer based on certain data. Authorities in Southern California believe they have uncovered the latest revenue stream used by Mexican gangs. Riverside County Sheriff's investigators recently rescued a woman who'd been kidnapped and forced to perform some sex acts on pay-to-view OnlyFans accounts online. The woman, who's remaining anonymous for her own protection, tipped investigators off to this scheme, which led them to a ring of illegal gambling operations at businesses that the Mexican mafia was extorting. The size of the operation is unknown, but investigators believe there are more women and perhaps others being exploited as well. A ransomware attack has shut down the Los Angeles County Superior Court system. The cyber attack happened Friday. It wasn't related to the massive Windows computer malfunction caused by a software update from cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike. Technicians believe the outage may have provided an opportunity for hackers, though. Officials say they should be back up and running by tomorrow or Wednesday at the latest. Again, that's a ransomware attack at the Los Angeles County Superior Court. 2 school board members in the city of Sunol are off the job after being recalled for their roles in a flag controversy. Voters in Alameda County successfully recalled Sunol Glen Unified School District board members Ryan Jurgensen and Linda Hurley. Several months ago, the two had sparked outrage for voting to pass a resolution that would only allow schools to fly the California and U.S. flags. Their votes came after a pride flag had been flown at one area school. The recall effort to remove Jurgensen and Hurley from their board seats began shortly thereafter, and voters were certified last week to boot them. There is a ceremony being held in Southern California today to mark a new U.S. stamp featuring former Jeopardy host Alex Trebek. First day of issue ceremony will take place in Culver City, paying tribute to Trebek on what would have been his 84th birthday. The stamp pays homage to the show's answer and question format. Trebek hosted the syndicated version of Jeopardy in Southern California from 1984 until his death in 2020 from pancreatic cancer. I'm Kim McAllister. Gil Gross is next here on The Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show. The Mark Thompson Show.
Who's Mark Thompson?
Hey, which one of you is Mark Thompson?
And this is the Mark Thompson Show. Mark steps away to go broadcast on the radio, and here we are on YouTube, and I bring in a legendary broadcaster, former KGO talk show host, and friend Gil Gross to the show. Gil Gross, hello.
Hey, hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Good. So the S hit the fan over the weekend. Everything happened. And President Joe Biden has decided to step away from the 2024 race. And I mean, I think a lot of people expected it. He puts the country above himself. And I'm wondering, when you first saw the news, what your thoughts were.
I mean, I knew that Saturday night they were bringing Biden new polling that the campaign had done. And I didn't know what it showed at that time. I do now. And that this would be among the reasons he would decide. Had nothing to do with health. It had nothing to do with age. It had nothing to do with those ridiculous op-ed columns about, Jill Biden wants to stay first lady and blah, blah, blah. They brought in polling. Basically, it showed he had no path to victory at all. Mm-hmm. That not only had support caved in all of the swing states, the only one he was close in public polls had been Wisconsin, but the others he was falling. But now, not only had he fallen badly in those states, but Virginia and New Mexico were now in play, which meant that they would have to spend time and a lot of money in two states where they didn't expect to have to spend a nickel. And that's when Biden knew the dig was up. Apparently, he made the decision Saturday night. The official announcement was Sunday, but it was the polling. The polling was disastrous.
How important was it for President Biden, moments after saying, I'm going to step away from the race, to throw his endorsement right behind Vice President Kamala Harris?
There wasn't any other possibility. It's too late for anybody to get involved. Money, since it was the Biden-Harris campaign, money from that campaign, money for the campaign headquarters in Delaware, all of that immediately transfers to Harris, no problem. They don't have to start from scratch. And that was very, very important. It's very late in the game to be starting a whole campaign group and trying to raise money from zero and all of that. Despite op-ed columnists, please don't read them. They don't know anything. Going on about, well, it could be this person, it could be that person. It couldn't be anyone but Harris. Now, you may think that she's a good choice or a bad choice, but really at this stage of things in July, there wasn't any other choice. I mean, financially and in terms of organization, she was it.
Well, Nancy Pelosi threw her endorsement to Kamala Harris today. And according to CNN, Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries will endorse as soon as today, according to their sources. There are Democratic congressional leaders planning to endorse her as well. Everyone is coming behind her. And you had a Facebook post over the weekend that, before I even had a chance to read it, people were emailing it to me, messaging it to me, and tagging my name, saying, you got to read what Gil Gross has to say. You're thinking that the candidacy of Kamala Harris could actually be a good thing for the country.
Well, it could be a good thing for the
Democrats.
and considering, what I think of Donald Trump, that's a good thing for the country.
That's right.
I mean, if the Republicans are running somebody else, who knows, but they're not.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a good thing for the Democrats because of some unique situations. Look, we're talking about 3 battleground states that matter: Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. None of the rest of it matters. And
did you mean to say Pennsylvania twice?
No, I'm sorry. Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin.
Okay, got it. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I, as a former resident of Pennsylvania, I could say, well, it's because Pennsylvania is twice as important. It is. Those are the 3 states that are going to decide the election. And it's a heavy burden because the Democrats have to carry all 3 of those states. Other states don't matter. And I know people look at national polls, and people on TV love, and on the radio, I'm sure, love to talk about national polls. National polls are meaningless and stupid, not because they're necessarily wrong, but because it's not how we pick a president. Mm-hmm. People say, but the poll said that Hillary Clinton was leading Trump. Yeah, she was. And she got 3 million more votes than he did. The thing is, again, that's not how we pick a president. Joe Biden got 7 million more votes than Donald Trump, but only 46,000 of those votes mattered. We pick by the Electoral College. You might hate it. It's not going anywhere. It's not changing. It's how our nation came into being, along with 2 senators for every state, because small states like Delaware, Rhode Island were going, oh my gosh, Virginia, Massachusetts, New York, and Pennsylvania are just going to rule the country. Yeah. We need some assurance that small states have a perhaps outsized say and can beat that. So the Electoral College comes into being, and you will never get the necessary constitutional amendment votes to change that because of the number of states. So set that aside. Forget the national polls. It's not how we pick a president. And in most of the states are either blue or red. So it doesn't matter. Some people are saying, oh, no one in Texas is going to vote for Kamala Harris. Who cares? I mean, they weren't going to vote for Biden. Won't vote for any Democrat.
Sure.
Probably not in our lifetime. It doesn't matter. I've heard people say, oh, maybe it's too late to get her name on the ballot in Ohio. Again, who cares? The Democrats aren't carrying Ohio. Plus, remember, when people talk about getting your name on the ballot, it's not as if you're voting for Joe Biden in Ohio. You're voting for his electors. Mm-hmm. And once their candidate is out, in most states, they can do what they want. In all states, after the first ballot, they can do what they want. So the worst thing that would possibly happen for Harris is she'd have to wait for the second ballot to the convention. But again, you're not voting for Joe Biden. It doesn't matter whether his name is still on there. You're voting for his electors, and if his electors are going to vote for Harris, Harris is the nominee. So there you go. Now, on the Facebook page. So what I posited, and this is still a steep climb for Democrats, because they are still behind in all of these states. So this is still a problem. But there are some unique things Harris brings.
Oh, I lost audio with you. You knocked into something, I think. You knocked your microphone and maybe a connection came loose. Oh, there you are. I hear you once again. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, there you are.
Nothing, I didn't touch anything. I didn't touch anything. And in fact, I'm on my cell phone. So
okay.
Maybe that's the problem. Those 3 states.
Right.
One of the reasons Biden won them last time is because African Americans showed up in big numbers. They had not shown up for Hillary, and they regretted it, especially Wisconsin. So African Americans in Milwaukee and Philadelphia and Detroit showed up big for Biden, and he carried it. The feeling in those communities has been, and it's shown in the state polling, that they don't think Biden did very much. They don't like Trump. It's not like they're being converted to Trump voters. They're just like, you know what? I don't have a dog in this fight. And this was a rare presidential election in that it seems to have been decided or being decided by, well, who do you hate the least?
Yep.
because both Trump and Biden had huge unfavorable numbers. So getting people to the poll, this election's not going to be about, whether somebody who was a Trump voter magically turns to Harris, or a Biden voter magically turns to Trump or something. This is going to be about turnout.
Yep.
So there's a possibility. And again, remember, the Democrats are starting from behind. So they need this. But Biden showed no signs of getting those people to the polls. Plus, he was losing people again in Virginia and even New Mexico, where you were talking about Hispanic vote for the most part walking away from him.
I saw even possibly New Hampshire as well.
Possibly New Hampshire.
Yeah.
New Hampshire's not a big deal. In New Mexico, all in all, isn't the huge.
It's an indicator
deal.
that there's a big problem, right?
It's an indicator it's a big problem. He wasn't connecting anymore. And this was less about age. And we really shouldn't be talking about age, but I'll get to that. This was really not so much about age as, well, we put you in because you had this record of doing stuff for us and taking us into consideration. And Democrats, let's face it, always do this with minorities. Then once we elected you, you kind of took us for granted. Nothing happened. You didn't do anything. So, sorry, you owe us. We don't owe you. Goodbye. And even though you can say, well, yeah, but if you don't vote for them, things are going to get worse. It's still something that people feel, that you didn't do anything for me. I put you in office. I'm not coming out for you again. I may not vote for anybody unless there's a big state election or something like that. I may just not show up.
It's so surprising to me that people think it's so surprising to me. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but when you talk about whether or not voters feel like President Biden has done anything for them, I feel like he's trying to get student loans erased for many people who are in debt, right? I mean, he's got the infrastructure bill happening so that America is stronger when you look around at our bridges and our roadways and everything else, and jobs have increased. So why do people think he hasn't done anything for them?
Democrats are terrible at advertising for themselves. How many ads have you seen about that? No. How much have you seen, if you tune in, not that conservatives watch MSNBC any more than liberals watch Fox, but in trying to drum up the vote and get people out, how many ads have you seen about, we put all these people to work building bridges and all of this stuff, and we're saving your lives because look at what happened at, in the bridge in Minneapolis, St. Paul, or look what happened to the I-95 bridge in Pennsylvania. Oh my gosh, Democrats are fixing that because of the infrastructure bill. When's the last ad you saw about that? Yeah. I mean, all of the cable networks go on and on and on about, not that it's not important, but it's not changing any votes. MSNBC and CNN cannot get enough of Trump on trial. Trump's in court.
Yeah.
Voters don't care. And now some people are watching this, listening to this and going, oh, but I care. You're probably somebody who already made up your mind. You probably weren't somebody who was considering Trump. In terms of swing voters, however many of them may exist, and again, most of the swing voters are swinging between voting and not voting, showing up or not showing up. In terms of swing voters, the economy is number one. And number two, which is interesting, is immigration. And this whole thing that Trump has sold people on, and Fox News has sold people on, that there's an immigrant crime problem, which there isn't. Statistically, it's not there. It just isn't there. But they've convinced people. It's gone from voters just a month ago, 20% of the voters thinking it was a problem, up to 28%. It's become the number two issue behind the economy. On what you were talking about, the economy, yes, unemployment's at a 50-year low. Really, it's even better than that, because 50 years ago, you had a lot of people who might otherwise have been considered employable in Vietnam. So out of a non-war populace, this is an incredible number in terms of unemployment. a ton of new jobs. 750,000 new manufacturing jobs were created. 11 million more jobs were created during the Biden administration. You know, we can go a record number of small businesses were started in that time frame. Did they do a good job of advertising that? No. Plus, you've had problems that affect people day to day, which the administration, not that they could do things about, Kim, because presidents only have so, and this be true for Trump as well, only have so much control over the economy. It's actually not much. It's kind of a roll of the dice how the economy does when you're president. That all said, they could have come up with bills to help people buy homes at a time of high home costs. Mm-hmm. They could have come up with bills to help people in the economy. They could have done a lot of things. They haven't, because Biden, as a creature of the Senate, has been very, very cautious, and Schumer has too, about introducing bills that fail because the Republicans won't vote for it.
Right.
They think that shows failure and a lack of power, rather than showing, hey, you aren't getting these medications. You can't afford these medications, right, even if you're on Medicare. Thank the Republicans for that. You can't afford this. Thank the Republicans for that. You know, and on and on and on. But that's something Biden and Schumer have not wanted to do. Whether Harris is going to be different, you know, we don't know.
Well, if they have a hard time, as you say, advertising the things they did do, then they'll have a real hard time advertising the things they didn't do. But I want to go back to your Facebook post because I keep derailing you from the topic.
That's okay.
Again, let's re-rack it and set it, because you say that the candidacy of Kamala Harris could benefit Democrats. So tell me how.
Okay. So we're talking mainly about turnout in those states. Mm-hmm. We're talking about the voters who didn't show up or felt that Biden didn't care about them. Remember how Hillary loses in part to Donald Trump. A couple of weeks before that election, she was supposed to make several stops in Wisconsin. And her campaign people, who were morons, frankly, decided, oh, we don't need to do that. We have this election in the bag. Who needs Wisconsin? They needed Wisconsin. They lost Wisconsin by about 22,000 votes. If the populace in Milwaukee had shown up for her, and if it seemed like she cared about them and wanted them, Hillary Clinton probably wins that election. You know, the same thing was hurting Biden this year. It's like, you know, where have you been? He gets back to Pennsylvania every once in a while because it's right near his home state of Delaware, and he has roots there in Scranton and all of that. Mm-hmm. But, you know, Joe, where have you been in Michigan and Wisconsin? You knew that these states were important for 2024. So that's basically what Kamala do. She can spur turnout again in Milwaukee, Detroit, and Philadelphia. If she can do that, then she can win. This is not about, again, turning Trump voters to Harris voters. This is about turning out people who had decided, you know what, two people I hate, they're not going to do anything for me, the hell with them.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Let's take a couple of comments. We have one of them coming in saying, well, let's look at this one. Just Give Me Truth says, Kamala is qualified on paper, but not in popularity or in deeds. Maybe you have a point in popularity right now. However, in deeds, I think she's done more and been tasked with more than most vice presidents are.
Yeah, not so much.
I mean, she went on the reproductive rights tour. She's been tasked with dealing with immigration issues at the border. So, I mean, I don't know, those are a couple big issues dumped in her lap.
So let's look at those. They gave her abortion because even though Biden is all for choice, he's Catholic and he's uncomfortable with it. And asked questions about it, he sometimes seems to hedge. It's totally understandable. It's like, well, this is my religion, but I understand as president, you know, my religion isn't the country's religion. And that's a great intellectual position.
Thank God for that.
Yeah, but he has a hard time selling it to a crowd. That's one thing. They gave her immigration, but she's been kind of dicey on immigration. When you look at specific proposals and things from her, she's it's been hard to ferret out exactly where she is on things. Now, what we don't know, and we're about to find out, is how much of that is her personal feelings and how much of that is because she's carrying water for the Biden administration, which has been all over the place in immigration. They've been all in favor of the Dreamers and all of that, but when they saw immigration becoming an issue that Trump and Fox News were pushing, rather than fighting it and saying, you know, these stats are completely made up. These incidents that you're pointing out, the guy who gave the two middle fingers and everything, that guy turned out, to have been wrongly arrested. He didn't do anything. That's what the middle fingers were about. He wasn't giving the middle fingers to America, as Trump and Fox were saying. He was doing it because they picked up the wrong guy. There's been a ton of things like that. But again, they haven't been on the attack on these things. So Biden, at first was kind of progressive in immigration, and then he moved away from that. Where Harris is, and this is going to be true of a lot of issues now that she's going to be her own person, we're not exactly certain. It comes with the vice presidency. It's not, her fault, and also she has not had a great relationship with Biden, despite what they're saying. Her camps have been opposed to one another. Biden picked her for, various political reasons, also because she was a close friend of Beau, which carries a lot of water with Joe Biden. That said, he never totally forgave her for her attack on his past views on busing and her attack in that primary, which was one of the few attacks during the Democratic primaries that kind of got to him, even though it didn't do much for her candidacy overall. Her staffs don't like each other. And one of the problems that we'll wait to see with Kamala is she's gone through a lot of staff. She comes on to them like a prosecutor, according to people there. Now you can say, well,
she is.
Yeah. And you can say, if you're thin-skinned, don't get the politics. You shouldn't be working for the vice president or the president of the United States. That all said, there was not a lot of closeness there, and they did not give her the amount of portfolio and everything that some other vice presidents have been given. So we'll see what she's like on her own. We haven't seen her on her own since that primary. Has she learned something? Maybe she's learned nothing. On the other hand, Bill Clinton, I remember at the Democratic convention 4 years before he was nominated and won, gave the worst convention speech I have ever seen in my life. He learned. Richard Nixon lost for governor of the state of California just a couple of years after he lost the presidency, barely to Kennedy. That's when he said, you won't have Nixon to kick around anymore. Less than a decade later, he's president of the United States.
Yeah.
Because he learned. Other people, Howard Dean, we can go through a whole list of people. I remember Pete Wilson, not our friend Pete Wilson, the anchor, but the former governor.
The former governor, yeah.
At a fundraiser in New York, coming up to my friend Ellen Fleischer when we were both at CBS, and Ellen going, who's going to vote for Pete Wilson, who was a very popular governor in California? And this campaign director said, and I'll never forget this quote, "The beaches of California are littered with the bleached bones of those who underestimate Pete Wilson."
Oh, wow.
Great. We stood there with our eyes like, really? Honest to God. Because I'm telling you, nobody here at this to-do knows who the hell he is. He didn't learn. He conducted a national campaign as he did his California campaigns and got buried. People have different learning curves, and we don't know what hers is yet. She's never been in this kind of campaign where she is really up against somebody from another party and somebody with the kind of almost cult support that Donald Trump has. We'll see.
Is it a done deal that Kamala Harris is the candidate? It's done.
Yeah.
There's no, you think there's no other open convention or shake up at the convention that could happen that would knock her out of this role?
I don't know. Maybe it came out that she kidnapped the Lindbergh baby. I mean, nobody else has the money. I mean, this is as of 9:45 this morning because I was stuck at my auto dealer's service center all morning, and there was only so much work I could do at the same time. But as of 7:45 our time this morning, Act Blue, which is just one group collecting money for the Democrats, had collected since Biden endorsed Kamala Harris, had collected, let me make sure I've got the right figure. Yeah, here we are, $84 million.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Those are small contributors. That's not Anthea Disney. That's not George Clooney. That's not any of the big people who are withholding their money. So, yeah, nobody else is going to be able to collect that kind of money in the short period of time.
So if she is the nominee,
yeah,
which we think is a given, can we, last question, respond to teacher Lori, who talks about, she's sorry, she says, misogyny and anti-Semitism are alive and well in the United States. It's time to pick, she said, who will win and forget the idealism of who should be running. Work on the ideals after we actually win the election. So the question to you then is, if we have a Kamala Harris, can Kamala Harris win? Is America ready for a woman, and a woman of color at that? Because I already had my heart broken when the last woman who actually had a real shot, I felt was shot down because she was a woman.
She wasn't shot down because she was a woman. Not totally. There were some
it's how
people.
It felt. It's how
she
it
was
felt.
shot down because of a horrible campaign. It was a terrible campaign. This is something the Democrats don't like to talk about. The Hillary Clinton campaign was a terrible campaign.
It shouldn't have mattered how horrible the campaign was.
It does matter.
Look who the other choice was.
It does matter. First of all, Trump didn't have a record yet. He'd only recently been, remember, a liberal Democrat.
Yep.
The Clintons went to his wedding.
Yep.
I mean, he gave millions of dollars. He gave
money to Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So the people weren't exactly sure what Trump was yet. He could be, as a lot of newcomers are, as Barack Obama was in his first, when he first ran. It's like he could be whoever you wanted him to be. That's not true anymore, which both works for him and also works against him. But it does matter how good your campaign is. I mean, this goes back to what I've been talking about from the beginning with you, Kim. You've got to get the voters out, and you've got to get them out in the states that tip the Electoral College. So that's the important thing. So we're talking about, can a woman, and we're talking about anti-Semites as well, even though, obviously she's not Jewish, but she may be reacting to people who are saying Josh Shapiro could be vice president.
Right.
Can they win? They have to win Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Pennsylvania has a Jewish governor. And Michigan has a very popular, far more popular than Trump or Harris, female governor, and on and on. So can they win those states? Yes. And that's all you have to do. Most of the rest of the states that matter in terms of Electoral College vote count are locked in blue or red. And the others, New Hampshire, are too small to make a difference.
All right.
So, that's what you have to do. I know, again, people are saying, oh, people in Kentucky, they'll never vote for, a woman who's half black and half Indian. Yeah, probably true. Guess what? It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, absolutely.
This is a math problem. I hate to make it because we all want to talk about ideals or, if you're Republican, you want to talk about, ooh, scary immigrants. They should have kept, Trump's father out. Oh, wait. It's a math problem.
Yeah.
You have to put your money and your politics and your workers on, who are on the ground in the states that carry the Electoral College.
Yeah.
Nothing else. California, we love our state. Doesn't matter. It's blue. New York, doesn't matter. Texas, huge state. It's red. It doesn't matter. Sometimes in local politics, yes, because local politics, and this is a major difference that everybody has to remember, in local politics, the popular vote counts. Mm-hmm. Presidential politics, it doesn't. It's the Electoral College. It's been our system. We're coming up on 250 years soon, you know. So this is what we've got. And if you take your eyes off of that and worry about national polls and states you're not going to win anyhow, then you lose.
Gil Gross, thank you for being here. I'm going to try to wrangle you again before the Democratic National Convention, but I really appreciate you taking the time. It's always amazing to sit and have a conversation with you. Oh, I lost your audio once again, but it happened at the perfect time. Bye, Gil Gross. See you next time. Gil Gross, everybody, legendary broadcaster, former KGO talk show host, lucky enough to have him on the show today. And now, after are we politicked out? I think we might be, because it's time to turn to a campfire story, a riveting tale. It's True Crime Corner with Courtney. Let's do it, Tony.
Let's pay a visit to Mark's True Crime Corner.
This is not a good neighborhood. I'm scared.
Now, here's your host, Mark Thompson.
Or Kim McAllister in for Mark Thompson. Hey, it's good to see you, Courtney. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm
so
good.
Nice to catch up.
Well, thank you for coming in today. And I don't know exactly what you'll be talking about, but I know that you've worked really hard on it. So what have you drummed up for us today?
I have. It's interesting. I came across this story and I was not familiar with this story. So I thought I would cover it today, which is the Bre-X gold scam. Are you familiar with this story?
No, not at all. I can't wait to hear about it.
It's fascinating. And it started really in the late 80s, but actually really happened like mid 90s. And I can't remember how I came across this story, but it was really fantastic. So the program that I listened to features this woman who's the host, Suzanne Wilton. It was produced by the CBC and the BBC because the story takes place in St. Paul, a small town outside of Alberta, Canada, which is St. Paul. And the whole series that I was listening to starts with this man who's in a helicopter, and his name is Michael de Guzman, and he's flying to a mine site that he's been working on for several years. And as he's flying to this mine site, he's in this helicopter that he's taken hundreds of times, if not more, over the last several years and working at this mine site. He's a geologist who's working with a business partner out of Canada. And he gets into the helicopter, and it's a different pilot who's piloting this helicopter. And there's another person in the helicopter who he's not familiar with. And the helicopter takes off. And shortly after takeoff, the pilot feels a loud sort of whoosh and an influx of air in the cabin. And he looks behind him, and Michael de Guzman is gone. And so there's some questions around whether or not he committed suicide or he was murdered or if it was an accident. But I'll get into all of that with the story. But it's a fascinating story. And it took place, as I mentioned, in the mid 90s. And it started out with this penny stock and this very small mining company out of Canada. And it ended up reaching a $6 billion market cap, which is why they call it the $6 billion gold scam. So Michael de Guzman is a geologist. He is from the Philippines, and he spent a lot of his career as an engineer and a geologist, but really had not found a lot of success. And he had been on several mining sites throughout his career, but he connects with a man named John Felderhoff in the late 80s. I think it was like 1987. And so they joined forces to look at several mining camps and locations in Borneo, in Indonesia. And they find a particular spot, and John Felderhoff knows a mining executive who has this very small company in Canada, and his name is David Walsh. And so John Felderoff goes to David Walsh, who has incorporated this small company called Briex Minerals with his wife, and they tell him that some initial finds in this area in Borneo, that there might be gold, and that John Felderoff has been working with this geologist and engineer, as I mentioned, Michael de Guzman. And so David Walsh comes up with $200,000 or $250,000 to start the permitting, to have access to the site, and to do all the payoffs that needed to happen to work in Indonesia with the president, whose name is Suharto. And so they start this, and they get permitting to work at this spot in Borneo in like 1993. So you can see there where this Busong mining site was in Borneo. Now, it is said that Michael de Guzman has a dream. And in this dream, he figures out that there is gold in this particular area of Borneo. And in fact, when they start to mine that area, they start to come up with gold. And it turns out that original findings and reportings of the area, that this is one of the richest gold mines in the world and historically. And so they start to raise money to continue to mine the area. And so they're raising money mainly in Canada. And actually, St. Paul is this very tiny community outside of Alberta, Canada. And it was said that 1 in 26 people in the city were buying stock of Briex. Because it was sort of getting around the city that they had this huge gold find, and that there were several, new millionaires in this little tiny enclave of people buying up the stock.
Okay, so this is suspicious. Right?
And when the stock was originally a penny stock, but it climbed to a value of, I think, like $285 something. So it was crazy. It was doing incredibly well. It was being traded in the Toronto Stock Exchange, but I also think it was traded on the New York Stock Exchange. But many people were millionaires overnight. And eventually, they raise all this money, they're mining this area, and they have to renegotiate their permitting with the Indonesian president. And so they start to renegotiate, but now other firms are coming in. So there's a slide kind of a little bit lower, Tony, and several other mining companies come in and kind of pitch this business and are working to ingratiate themselves with President Suharto. A lot of it had to do with hiring his family members. So his family members were working for all these different mining companies. But in the end, when they were doing that, these third-party new mining companies brought in auditors to look at the reports and look at the gold that was being found and reported at these specific sites. And in the findings of these new auditors, here we go, Freeport is one of the US companies that came in and negotiated a pretty large ownership of this permit to mine this area in Borneo. And the auditor, if you go down one, I think the auditor comes in for Freeport. And what had been happening is Michael de Guzman would find time to be alone with the samples that were being mined. And he was actually shaving off the gold from his wedding ring and putting it into the samples that were coming in.
Lies.
For years. And he eventually ran out of gold in his wedding ring. So now he was buying gold nuggets from the people who were mining, from the native people from that area who were mining that gold in the river surrounding this area. He was buying gold nuggets from them, and he was putting it into these gold samplings.
That is crazy.
The auditor.
Like, how sustainable is that? It can't possibly, he knows he's going to get found out sooner or later.
Right. And then that brings us to the helicopter. But yes, I mean, there was, I don't think any long-term planning in this. And I think he got way ahead of himself because you're right, there was no sustainability around this. And maybe it comes without question that eventually the negotiation of these permits would in fact come up because they were only permitted for a year. And so third parties would come in, and bring people to look at the samplings and the reporting, which was erroneous. And one of the auditors talked about like the shape of the gold. So based on where they were mining the gold, it should have been more like shaved gold, and some of the gold felt more like nuggets. And so at the time, Michael de Guzman kind of talked about this theory called volcano pool, which is essentially like because there were volcanoes in the area and volcanoes eventually would implode on themselves, the heat and the pressure in that happening would change the shape and the makeup of the gold.
And as a geologist, he ought to have known that. Meanwhile, he's going home and his wife's like, hey, where's your wedding ring, pal? What's going on?
Exactly. Well, Michael de Guzman also had 4 wives. Exactly. And
at the same time?
Knew about each other. Exactly.
He had 4 wives at the same time?
Yes. He was busy. And
he's
he
not
had
a sympathetic character, Courtney, I have to tell you.
I know. But whatever ring it was for whatever betrothed woman he had, that ring eventually, you're right, was what went away. And so in the findings of these reports, that was eventually reported back to Canada. In January of 1997, this is all coming to a head. And there is a fire, in quotes, at the headquarters of the Briex Minerals camp in Borneo. So it is alleged that Michael de Guzman set that camp on fire, that headquarters, and everything was lost in that fire. And again, that's January 1997. And in March of 1997, in fact, March 19th, that is when Michael de Guzman boards the helicopter from one of the main cities in Manila, or in Borneo, and takes that helicopter to the mining site. And that is in fact when he leaves the helicopter, whether by choice or otherwise. And this shot on the right is just a shot of the helicopter, from the year prior. When he exits the helicopter, whether by choice or not, he is found 4 days later in the jungle. So Michael de Guzman's body, or a body, is found in the jungle. Now, what's really interesting about the body is, and I don't want to get too graphic, but there is no face, there are no hands, and there are no feet. So
interesting.
And only one person ever identified him.
How obvious can it be? I mean, how do you mysteriously lose a face and any fingerprints? Come on.
Yeah, exactly. And his wife, one of them, her name is Jeannie, Michael de Guzman's wife, said that Michael de Guzman did not have any real teeth, but part of the identification process was alleged to have come from his dental records, and that he had teeth intact. So who is to say what happened? I don't want to go too far down the conspiracy theorist, but it is a very interesting and unfortunate end to this story. Now, he did leave a suicide note, but as I mentioned before, it was not the same pilot. There was a mechanic to help with any mechanical issues that was on the helicopter who had never ridden with him before. And in fact, he passes away. The 2 other people in this story are John Felderhoff and David Walsh. David Walsh leaves Canada. He moves away. I believe he was in the Bahamas, and he dies of a brain aneurysm, I think in like his mid-50s. And then John Felderhoff died just in the last couple of years. This is David Walsh. He was actually robbed in the Bahamas. Several people entered his house masked, took all of his money, and he did not die from that. He died later, days later, from a heart attack.
Wow.
And then John Felderhoff passed away, I believe in like 2019, 2000 or 2020. he lived in Indonesia for the rest of his life after this happened. Now, unfortunately, all of these men sold their stock before the big crash. So they all made a lot of money. In fact, I think it said that John Felderhoff made $87 million off of the stock prices for Bre-X. I watched a movie that was inspired by this story called Gold. It was it was fine.
That's got Matthew McConaughey in it.
Yeah, I mean, they managed to make him look not like Matthew McConaughey. Mm-hmm. He looks like a mining executive. But it's interesting because this story is based on this movie is based on this story. And in fact, Michael McConaughey's character is named Kenny Wells, but originally he was Kenny Walsh after David Walsh. But for some reason, the makers of this film decided to distance themselves from the story. So they changed the names and changed some of the storyline, which is a little bizarre because the story in and of itself is awful, but it could potentially make for an interesting Hollywood film. So it's unclear to me why they wanted to distance themselves from this story, but it's an interesting movie. It was made by the Weinstein Company too, which is not a production company. I see that often. But yeah, it's a fascinating story. And it certainly is surprising that they were able to pull that off in the mid-90s. So,
Maud says, I can't find any sympathy for these people.
I know. No. Exactly. I know. It's awful. I mean, a lot of people lost a lot of money, a lot of institutions too, that put money into the stock. Because as I mentioned before, it's this small, very close community in this rural town in Canada. So word got out pretty quickly that you could buy the Bre-X stock, and people were finding great wealth very fast.
So do we think the geologist is somewhere in the world living out his life with quadrillions of dollars and new wives?
I know. I mean, it's hard. I try to avoid conspiracy theorists, but it's hard not to think about everything that went into creating a way by which he would either be murdered, fake his own death, or suicide, right? Like there had to be components where certain people who would regularly be with him on that helicopter wouldn't be there to report or, be able to intervene with whatever was happening. This is actually a picture of the crew, and you can see John Felderhoff and Michael de Guzman there in the middle. But yeah, I don't know. Who knows? It's alleged that certain communications have come from Michael de Guzman since the alleged suicide or murder, but I don't know. Yeah.
Kathleen Bryant wants to know, what about the DNA?
That's a good question. I mean, I think because it happened in Indonesia, I don't want to make any.
They don't have a lab? I don't know.
I just don't know what the process is. I don't know if they kept the DNA. I'm not sure if what their process is of finding and investigating it. And maybe there's enough payoff that it doesn't, you know what I mean? They're fine with whatever's happened.
Do you think the movie kind of matches the intrigue of the story you just told? Does it do a good job?
Yeah, I mean, they have. It's interesting. They took a bit of the liberties with it, and they kind of Hollywoodized it. Mm-hmm. like Matthew McConaughey he has an issue with his marriage and a drinking problem, like kind of the things that Hollywood puts in to create, conflict and challenge when the story in and of itself has enough. Right. But I thought it was interesting. They definitely changed certain things within the story. And so, but certainly they do. I mean, if you were to believe the story for face value, very much Michael de Guzman is the only person that knew about any of the misrepresentation in the reports, the lying and the use of the gold on the ring and the mined gold from the prospectors who are prospecting in the rivers that surrounded that mining area. But I don't know. I mean, it would be hard to imagine that John Felderhoff and David Walsh, being geologists and engineers and mining executives in and of themselves, didn't have any idea of what was happening in the falsification of the records. So there's an interesting story. There was only one interview that David Walsh ever gave about what was happening with Bre-X, and this was in 1997, earlier part of 1997, where he really does go on to just talk about this really amazing, unlikely finding of gold, this mini gold rush that they had come across as a company, and really sort of denying that there was any kind of mishandling or misrepresentation of what they had found. So
it's a wild story. Courtney, you've done it again. Wow.
Thanks. Oh, thanks. Yeah, it is a crazy story. It really is. I cannot believe that it was able to happen in the mid-90s, but it was. The series is available. It's really great. The series is available to listen as a podcast, so anyone interested.
That's on the CBC?
Yeah, okay. I think you can get it wherever you listen to your podcast, but it's produced by the CBC and the BBC. Yeah.
And it's called the $6 billion gold scam?
The $6 billion gold scam, yeah.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Courtney, thank you so much for coming on, even though Mark's not here.
Oh, I like it better.
Well, girls are going to be running the world soon anyway, so we might as well start now, right?
No, you're always so sweet to have me. Yeah. And so thank you. Thank you for always inviting me when he's not on.
Thank you for taking the time to research the story and get all the pictures together and come on with it. Hope to see you next Monday as well.
Yes. Thank you. Take care.
Thanks. Bye, Courtney. And that is True Crime Corner.
True Crime Corner, only on the Mark Thompson Show.
Yay! Well, we've had a lot of good stuff on the show today, from Gary Dietrich to Gil Gross to Courtney coming through, Asley coming through with a couple bucks. The show's crowdfunded, so all of the contributions are so appreciated. And I have loved to see the comments all day coming through as well, so thank you for that. I'll see you next on the After Party Live. Come and subscribe. Come hang out. We don't do politics. We just kind of decompress. And everything is good. Mark will be back tomorrow. It's David K. Johnston. It's Jefferson Graham and more of Mark on the Mark Thompson Show. Imagine that. That is tomorrow. And Tony, huge thank you to you for running all the pictures and getting everything together. Really appreciate you. I'll see you guys all tomorrow. Bye, Tony. Bye, everybody. See you on the after party. See you later.
I'm putting the link in the chat right now. Give me a minute.
Oh, thanks, Tony. Find the after party link in the chat. All right, you guys. See you tomorrow on the Mark Thompson Show.
I'm Stevens for the Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All the time. Bye-bye.